Hey, Optimancers, Chris here. So I just got finished talking with Colby right here from D4 Deep Dive about the base monk class in the new playtest document, and now we're going to talk about the new subclasses. But what you should do is up above here somewhere and down in the description somewhere there will be links you can press and go see that video, which you should absolutely do. And if you aren't subscribed, of course you should subscribe. His is basically, other than my own channel, my favorite channel on YouTube.
Right.
I'll reserve my favorite for
Thank
my
you.
own. Uh,
That's totally warranted.
but we talked. We had lots to say about the new monk, and I don't. We're not going to rehash everything, but I guess just to sum up, what I would say is, we recognize that there's some good things and there's some bad things, but overall, we thought basically hit on all the big things we wanted from the new monk.
Yeah, we're
No,
happy.
no, that wasn't
No,
it.
no, not even close.
Not even close. We were pretty
Mostly frustrations.
we were pretty frustrated with what we saw in the new monk, and we didn't have a lot of positive things to say. Hopefully, we'll have some more positive things to say about some of the subclasses.
Yes,
So,
that is
let's
the hope.
yeah. So we have three new subclasses here, and then they're going to include the Warrior of Mercy. It's going to be called, but it's the Way of Mercy is going to be included as well. But they're not going to, or at this point, they're not revising it at all. So we'll
I
also
was gonna
discuss about what we
say,
think about that.
yeah. Well, okay, never mind. I'll save my thoughts for the end.
Okay, we will talk about the Way of Mercy a little bit, at least to determine if we figure it could warrant any changes. But I just want to kind of go in the order that they were presented, and the first one they presented was the Warrior of Shadow, which replaces the Way of Shadow. And let's just start with what were your overall impressions of the subclass?
Um, Shadow Monk feels really good to me. And by really good, I mean maybe the best subclass that monks have access to, perhaps with the exception of Mercy Monk. Um, yeah, so that I guess is my overall impression. I think that they did a lot of things, and I kind of am worried that they're gonna scale it back because some of it, like with the darkness stuff especially, is really strong and potentially problematic too for your team. So we can get into that. But
Yeah, that is my concern with it as well. I read it, and it's super cool. Um,
yeah.
I just I read every single feature, and they all kind of just fit together. It's this gelling of
Mm-hmm.
features, synergy, um, and it's all thematic. And then I wonder, okay, you can move your darkness at the start of your turn. Is that enough to keep it from frustrating the other players
Right.
at the table?
Right.
That's
Right.
my
So
that's my
so
big concern about this one.
so let's jump in. So with that, the shadow arts, right? You still get the cantrip, the
Minor illusion.
minor illusion cantrip, which
Yeah.
great, that's potentially useful. Um, they removed pass without trace,
Yep.
and
And
that's a pretty
silence.
big deal. And silence, that's right.
Yeah. And
And
was
that's a
there?
pretty big deal.
Yes. Yes.
And those are good spells. Particularly, I think I would argue pass without trace.
Yeah.
Now it's only situationally useful, I guess. You're not always trying to stealth around, right? But when you need it, it's incredibly good. But yeah. Dark vision. You could cast dark vision as
Okay.
well.
Okay. And now you don't need to cast dark vision.
Sure. Although, couldn't you do dark vision on somebody else?
You
You touch a
can. You
willing
can cast it
creature,
on other
right?
people. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so there were some nerfs there, but I think they more than made up for it by buffing it the way they did, right? So you can now cast darkness with just one key point. Am I wrong? It's just one, right? Instead of two.
One discipline point.
Discipline point, sorry. I'm gonna have a really hard time ever calling it anything other than key, but maybe I'll get there one day. Right. So one discipline point, and then you can see through it when you do it this way. So now we've got, devil sight and darkness. And of course, as probably everybody who watches our channels knows, that's potentially really good because if you can see your enemy and they can't see you, then now you have advantage on all of your attacks and they have disadvantage on attacks against you. But of course, the big problem is a 30-foot bubble of darkness, right, on the battlefield now. And unless all of your allies also have Devil's Sight or maybe blind fighting or something, but even then, that's only a 10-foot range, right? Um, that's potentially problematic. Now, sure, uh, if I'm in darkness and I can't see my enemy and they can't see me, then it's a wash, right? As far as attacks go, no advantage, no disadvantage. But there's lots of things in the game that you need to see either your enemy or your ally for. Lots of spells, lots of other things, right? So yes, having a big blob of darkness on the battlefield problematic, but now we can move it and it doesn't even require a bonus action. We can just move it. And so it's like that can become useful for teleportation later. And maybe I can get it so that it's not such an obstruction, for my friends. I kind of wish, and maybe this is too much because it's already really strong. Like, could they let us shrink it or
No, I
like,
had the exact same idea. I
you
had the
know?
exact same idea when I, I was going to mention what changes would we like to see, if any. One change: let the shadow monk make the area of darkness smaller. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
that's
Just
what needs to
maybe
happen.
just on themselves. And now it's kind of shadow and loyal or
Yeah,
a reduced shadow and
yeah,
loyal.
one
Maybe that's too
square,
strong,
sure.
but yeah. Anyway, potentially really strong, potentially still problematic for the rest of your team and not and your DM, of course. But yeah, I like it. I mean, it's cool and it's very
It is.
thematic.
Yeah, yeah. I also
Um,
really like it, and I am worried as well about the teammate situation. And it's not just spellcasters. Like if I'm playing a barbarian and you make my
mhm,
reckless attack useless, I'm not happy.
mm,
If I have
mhm.
topple and I can make enemies prone, and that becomes useless, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Advantage is cheap in this playtest. Like when I've playtested, advantage is easy to get, and you're
With weapon
taking that
masteries
away.
now, especially.
So the whole question is the movement going to prevent you from screwing over your allies?
Mm.
And I don't know because it's so big, right? And that's a
Yeah.
concern. And I have played at tables mostly as a DM where one player casts fog cloud or darkness or something like that, and other players get frustrated,
hmm
right?
hmm
And I'd
I've been
hate to
that
see
player.
that happen, right? I'd hate to
Yeah.
see that happen here. This is something that would work so well in solo play, but with a team, unless you're building, like, yeah, you can plan your builds together, but if you don't, and you end up in that situation where now the barbarian who had the prone enemy has just lost their advantage because you can't get the darkness off them,
Right.
there's going to be people
Right.
upset.
Right.
And we don't want that, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not worth it for that. But what I
Yeah.
really love is that this synergizes so well with the other features. They all flow together just so
Yes.
nicely.
Yeah. The ability to move the darkness in
Yeah,
particular, I think, makes it, and to be able to see in it.
yeah, and you
So
get dark
that,
vision for free now.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to the level 6, the
Oh,
shadow step.
and did you? I don't know if you mentioned.
Oh,
Did you mention that it was? Yeah, you did. You mentioned it was only one discipline point now.
right,
Yeah,
right. And that's a big deal for those of us with not a lot of discipline points,
yeah.
like
I appreciate
all monks.
any reduction to the price of monk features.
Right,
Yeah.
for sure.
Then you have
Okay, so
shadow
shadow
step.
step.
Yeah.
Yeah, how's that changed?
Well, it really hasn't, except for the fact that you can see through your own darkness, which
Right,
means now you can teleport within the darkness freely.
right.
And because you can move
And
the darkness 60 feet,
right.
you can move it exactly where you want to go and, teleport there. And, the entire area of the darkness is almost as much as your range. So you can
hmm
pretty much almost guarantee that you'll be in darkness and the destination
Yep.
will be in darkness.
Yeah.
So the synergy
And the
there is
fact that
fantastic.
yeah, the fact that you can move this darkness without requiring any action or bonus action or even reaction on your part
Yeah.
is so awesome for this.
Yeah. So just to
And
be,
that you can see in it.
just to, in case we didn't mention it, you can move the darkness 60 feet at the start of your turn.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so they didn't need to change Shadow Step because it got massive benefits from the changes they made to the level 3 feature.
that's right.
Um, but what about improved Shadow Step at 11th level?
Yeah. Okay. So now you have improved Shadow Step, um, and then you can use one discipline point to remove. Now, I have a question about this, and I'm curious how you read it. It says you can spend one discipline point to remove the requirement that you must start and end in dim light or darkness for the use of that feature. Does that mean you neither need to start or end in dim light or darkness, or is it just one or the other? Because I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's both
You think it's
because
both?
and I
Okay.
think so. I think otherwise it would say that you must start or end in dim light or darkness, right? You can
Maybe,
remove the
yeah.
requirement that you must start and end in dim light or darkness,
I
but
think
they
it
could
could be more
clarify
clear.
that.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm not super happy with that wording. Um,
Yeah.
and then as a bonus action, you can make an unarmed strike immediately after the teleportation, which will be with advantage, but it has to now be an unarmed strike.
Yeah.
Yeah, um,
But as we discussed last time, that's probably our best option anyway.
yeah,
Well, it depends.
probably. But what it does
By
do
11th level.
is it prevents you having that choice of what attack is going to have the advantage. It's automatically going to
Yeah.
be an unarmed strike. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
basically an extra attack because it's part of the
Right.
bonus action. So you
Mm.
get your full attack action after that or before that if you want.
And so it's like I do love the idea, right, of I spend so round one, I'm like casting darkness and then teleporting up to the nearest enemy and hitting them with my bonus action, right? With advantage.
And you still have your action left.
That's a what's that?
And you still have your action left.
Because but wait, casting
Oh no, if you
darkness.
cast darkness on round one.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm talking yeah,
Okay.
round one, cast darkness, teleport and make a strike right off the bat is cool. I mean, it's not going to be probably the most damage you could do on round one if you were just instead to run up and hit somebody. But you know,
It does
there's
let you
going to be
do the
lots of good
one stunning
reasons.
strike you're allowed on your turn.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. Unfortunately, it ends at the beginning of your next turn, so it's not going to benefit you in any way, but it might help your allies, or it might
Unless
benefit you
they're,
in
well,
that
not
your enemy is
necessarily.
stunned and can't attack you.
Because if, well, if they better not be in your darkness. Because if they are, that's going to cancel out any advantage that.
That's true. That's true because they don't stack.
Yeah. And, and then you
Yeah,
get a
that's
17th
fun.
level feature, Cloak of Shadows. As a bonus
Mhm.
action, while entirely within dim light or darkness, you can spend 3 discipline points to shroud yourself with magical darkness for 1 minute until you have the incapacitated condition or until you end your turn in bright light. So you can enter
Right,
bright light as long as you don't stop there.
right.
And then, while shrouded in darkness, you gain the following benefits. You have the invisible condition, and that's helpful depending on how they end up landing on the wording of the invisible condition. But
Mhm.
if you're facing something like blind sight or something, that might be very helpful. You're incorporeal. They say partially incorporeal, but it's basically mechanically the same as monsters that have incorporeal. You can end
Mhm.
your turn in a wall or under the ground. You take a D10 damage, right? That's really nice.
Sure.
Yeah, and then flurry of blows is free.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which maybe by level 17 we don't need the key points, but now that it's really expensive to stay alive when we drop to 0 hit points, maybe we're happy to save those key points.
yeah,
Discipline points. So yeah, I mean that's a good feature.
yeah.
I didn't hate the old Shadow Monk kind of capstone feature there. It was the free attack as a reaction. It was basically half of the Sentinel feat, right? Like if somebody within 5 feet of you gets hit or something like that, you can make a free attack against an enemy. That wasn't bad,
Yeah.
but
I
this
just
feels better.
I like thematically this really seems to just constantly go back to the idea of your monk as a master of shadows, right?
Yes.
That
And
and the old Shadow Monk didn't achieve that the same way that this one
yeah,
does.
I
This one
agree.
is really focused in on you're the shadowy monk
Yeah,
popping through the shadows and hitting the enemy, right?
I
Um,
agree. So
yeah,
kudos to Wizards for really trying. And I think you could argue that they've done a pretty good job of this for the most part, with the UA stuff in general, right? Of trying to make things just feel a little more thematic and maybe distinct, which is cool. Uh, I guess I feel like I have to say that even though I do like the 17th level feature, it's technically, I think you'd say, a reduction in damage output, probably. Um,
it's a
Changing
reduct.
it from the
Oh,
reaction
compared to
attack
what it
that they
was.
used to
Yeah,
get.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, not that damage is everything, but on a class who notoriously is behind on other
Well, on
martials
17th
for
level, you're going to
damage.
be struggling for damage with the monk. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So anyway, yeah, we like the Shadow Monk.
we
Okay.
do.
What about four elements? Actually, let me turn on this light.
Yeah.
Sun's setting over here, and it's getting dark. I don't love the fluorescent light, but oh well. I will sacrifice my own vanity.
All right. So before we talk about the new Warrior of the Elements, what were your thoughts about the Way of Four Elements monk?
The original?
Yeah. Have you played one?
No, I have built one, but I have not played one. And this might be controversial. I didn't hate it as much as most people seemed to. Again, that's with the understanding that I never actually played one in game. So I just built one in a lab, and it seemed to me on paper that with a lot of help from multiclassing, as you always need to do with monks, right? It wasn't bad. Like you could do some cool stuff with it. You could do some decent burst damage, and push people around, and like there were some cool things. Now their spells were way too expensive, right? And they didn't scale high enough, and you probably didn't get enough options. They needed to give you just access to all of the elemental spells that they were giving you, and probably make them cost less, and maybe even do some other things. But I I don't know. I thought that you could make it work if you tried really hard.
I actually only
And
have
I Go ahead.
I only actually have two problems with the Four Elements monk, but I do think those two problems add up to a lot. Um,
Yes.
so you've got Arcane Tricksters that giving rogues a taste of spellcasting. You got Eldritch Knights
Mhm.
giving fighters a taste of spellcasting. You have Four Elements monks giving monks a taste of spellcasting. But only in the case of monks do you have to go back to your base class resources and
E.
expend them to cast those spells.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yep.
else gets their own
Spell
resource
slots.
pool that is part of the subclass. With the monk, nope,
Hmm.
you got to use your key.
Yeah.
My other issue with it is I think some of the disciplines are very poorly worded.
Mm.
Like you have, I think the prime example is Shape the Flowing River. So it says that you target an area of water up to 30 feet. Can I use damp ground, right, to raise a 30-foot
Can I
wall
spit?
15 feet
Yeah.
thick? Because there's nothing saying one way or the other. So you're
True.
either looking at exploitation of poorly worded rules to make it work, or it's you just don't have enough key to keep those things going
Yeah.
the way they should,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's bad design, I think.
Yeah. Um, okay, so what about the new Four Elements monk? Is it better?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you agree?
I think I agree. I
Yeah.
think I agree. I think that I will kind of put this little caveat in there, which is, even though I do think it is better overall and easier to make viable, I feel like it maybe loses a little bit of the flavor. And maybe this is just me, because for me, the Way of the Four Elements monk was the last Airbender Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that was the fantasy, right?
Yeah.
And you could kind of get there with what you had with the old Way of the Four Elements monk. I don't know that you like it. That's not a lot with this version to me. And of course, flavor is free, so I guess maybe I'm wrong,
No,
and
no,
you
I
can
agree.
create it. But
I agree.
it's just very different,
It
right?
is.
Very different.
It is. It
You're
is an
not really a
entire.
spellcaster at all,
Yeah. They basically took the old Four Elements monk, threw it in the dumpster, started
right?
from scratch, which I'm okay with because
Sure.
the old one was bad design, and it was going to be a hard fix. Um,
Yes.
so I agree. I think this is better than the old one, and I also agree. I don't think this is quite there. Um,
Yeah.
I think it is in the right direction. It's
Hmm.
promising, but it doesn't quite do what I think it should do. I don't think it's
What's
terrible. I just
yeah.
it's not.
It,
It's close.
with
Yeah,
some tweaking, they could be in a pretty good place.
yeah,
Forgetting the fact that the base class is struggling so much.
yeah. That's looking at it independently of the
Right.
dumpster fire that is the monk. Yeah.
So,
Sorry,
okay,
sorry.
let's talk
It
about
was
why.
a dumpster fire. Now they poured gasoline on that.
Okay, well, let's get into the details then
Yeah.
of the subclass.
All right. So,
You start off with your elemental attunement.
mhm.
So that means the elementalism cantrip, right?
What was your
And
opinion on
then,
that?
I mean, okay,
Yeah,
it's a cantrip.
it's
It's a, you know,
it's very much there was a discipline that the Four Elements monk got that was kind of the same.
mm,
So I think
mhm.
it's a
Yeah, that's
fair
true.
replacement for
That's fair.
that. Yeah.
Sure. But then now at the start of your turn, you spend a discipline point, and you get this elemental energy, right? That lasts for 10 minutes, which is nice, or until you're incapacitated. And then you get some nice benefits. Whenever you hit with your unarmed strikes, you can cause it to deal elemental damage, essentially acid, cold, fire, lightning, rather than its normal damage type. That's potentially useful depending on the enemies you're fighting, right? Resistances they may have, etc. And or if you're multi-classed with a Tempest cleric, I suppose, or whatever else. When you deal one of these types with your unarmed strike, you can also force the target to make a strength save, and on a fail, they move 10 feet away from you or towards you. So you get some, you can push or pull, which is nice. And there's no additional resource cost for that, right? So we're moving enemies. There's no size restriction there either, right? They still get a strength save, but it's not the large or smaller where what we often get with pushing and pulling. Um, and then your unarmed strikes are made with reach. So we got a 10-foot reach. So those are all pretty nice things. They might not by themselves necessarily increase your damage, but they give you some options. And depending on what else you're doing, what else your teammates are doing, they could, do a lot of extra damage on, a spike growth or a cloud of daggers, for example, et cetera. You know all the tricks.
Yeah. My one issue I have with this is like the first thing they tell you is you can do acid, cold, fire, lightning damage with your strikes. But what is the advantage of doing that? You mentioned maybe there's multi-class. If you use the old Tempest cleric from the old player's
Hmm.
handbook when the new player's handbook comes
Hmm.
out. Um, Otherwise, in 90% of the cases, I don't see any advantage to these over
Right.
force damage. They're
It's
less
neat.
reliable than force damage. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, they're neat. But monster vulnerabilities are pretty rare. So for
Yeah.
in most cases, this isn't really an advantage. And
How about an extra
I,
D4 of damage
that's
on a hit or
exactly
something?
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. There should be a D4 of damage here, even if it's
Yeah.
once per turn. Once on your
Sure.
turn, you can add a D4 of one of these damage types to
Well,
your
if it's
unarmed
only
strikes.
once per turn, then it's got to be a D6 or
Sure.
D8.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Cody. Okay. You got me.
Yeah.
But something, right? I like the reach. I like
Yeah.
the ability to push and pull. And at
Mhm.
first I'm reading it and I'm like, pull. And then I'm like, oh, you get reach. Right.
Is
And then I'm
10
like, but
feet?
10
Yeah.
feet. And then I'm like, oh, but I could be playing a bugbear. Right. you know? So, yeah, those are cool. But there should be, yeah, I don't know. You're going to throw this elemental stuff on your. It feels like there should be a damage boost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give it just a little bit more.
And then at level
Okay.
6,
Yeah. Tell me
environmental
about
burst.
environmental burst.
What's your opinion on that one?
Well, I mean, okay, let's why don't I read it so
Mm-hmm.
that those who may not be versed yet will understand. So this is a magic action. You can spend 2 discipline points to cause environmental energy to burst in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point within 120 feet of yourself. It can be acid, cold, fire, or lightning. Everybody has to make a dex save, and if they fail, they take 3 rolls of your martial arts die. On a successful, half damage. And then before or after the action, you can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action. So, okay, we're talking fireball radius, right? For 3d8 damage instead of 8d6 damage.
Yep.
So way less damage, obviously. Now you do get to
I mean, it
make an
does
unarmed strike.
scale. It does scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's eventually
um,
3d12.
right. Yeah. So 3d8 at this level when you get
Yeah.
it. Um, and the unarmed strike thing is nice, especially because that would, for example, let you move an enemy into position so that you could then, hit them with your area of effect damage that maybe you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Does a little extra single target damage and then area of effect damage. It's cool. Um, it's maybe not enough for 2 discipline points. I'd like to see. I mean, could it be 4 times your martial arts die?
Maybe.
Something like that. Could you flurry of blows
Yeah.
along with it and get 2 unarmed strikes? Something. It just feels still a little soft to me.
It is one of those features that I almost like. Just about. It's so close.
Yeah,
Yeah, it area of effect damage for a monk, fantastic, right?
yeah, yeah.
Hurrah for 2 discipline points. That's less. I think. How much did it cost for the old 4 elements monk to cast Thunderwave?
Oh,
Right?
yeah. It was expensive.
Yeah,
Sure.
and that was less damage and smaller area and no range, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, I appreciate the way we're going here. 2 discipline points seems high to me too. I
Yeah.
kind of think this sounds like a 1 discipline point feature to me, and I'd like
Right.
it because I like that even if it's way less than a fireball. Just the ability to damage lots of creatures at once, cool. I do wonder, does this spread around corners?
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Would like to know that.
Yeah.
But I do think, yeah, 2 points for 3 dice does seem just a little bit too much. It's better
How
than it used to
about
be.
how about make it cost 1 as a base, and then if you spend 2, you can sculpt it
Oh,
so that it doesn't
there
hit
you
your
go.
allies.
4 elements monk, it was 2 key points to cast Thunderwave.
Yeah, it
We
was.
can both agree this is way better than Thunderwave, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. For sure. For sure. But I did like I mean, what I was
And it's
relying on
3 key points to
primarily,
cast Shatter. We could probably agree it's better
right.
than Shatter too.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I liked previously before was like the Fist of the Unbroken Air stuff, which were not even spells, but they were fun to play with.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. Okay, so this is nice. It's close, it feels like. The 11th level feature, where for those who haven't seen the first part of this series, you need to go watch that. But as Chris said, and I agree with, the monks need something at level 11, not just a subclass feature that is a little lackluster, right? And so here we're getting the 11th level shadow or 4 elements monk feature, Stride of the Elements, that tells us that when you use Step of the Wind, you gain a fly speed and a swim speed equal to your speed for 10 minutes. So 10 minutes is nice.
I like this.
And let's remember that Step of the Wind now is better than it was because you can dash and disengage. right, as an action,
I don't care. I'm
and
doing it
now
outside of combat.
and
I
now we're
have better
flying.
things to do with my bonus action in combat than Step of the Wind. But it's 10
Yeah,
minutes. I'll do it before combat. One discipline point, and I've got fly and swim speed equal to my monk speed. I
yeah.
think that's good. And it's
And monks
about
have
time.
notoriously great speed.
It's about time monks got fly that doesn't end at the end of their turn.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
goodness. We've got a monk that can actually fly.
yeah. That
Yeah.
can step of the wind and really
And step
fly on the
into the
wind.
wind. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I liked it.
So
I
yeah,
actually like this feature. I like it.
it's good.
Yeah.
It's really good. Um, and
It's not enough for
you
level
know,
11. Like, it doesn't replace getting a big boost at
a
level
third
11.
attack every
Yeah.
single turn or
Yeah.
whatever, right? And maybe this should be said. Well, of course, if they're truly making, this new edition, this new version, which isn't a new version, I guess, backwards compatible, then maybe it doesn't matter so much. But my sense is that they're removing flight from sorry, racial options or whatever we're going to call them now.
Species.
Species, thank you. Um, and
Do you
so
think
this
so?
is, I thought they were. Why do I think that?
I don't know why you think that.
Um, I mean, I guess they haven't. Well, yeah.
They haven't
I let me
taken
let
flight
me
away from anything yet.
let me then make a prediction. I'm going to predict that Aarakocra and Owlin and fairies are not going to make it to like the player's handbook,
Oh, well, we know that.
for example.
We already know
Yeah,
the races that, or the species that will be in the player's handbook, and they're not
and
of them. Yeah.
and so maybe that's why I'm saying that, and maybe I'm thinking, well,
I mean,
this
the species that are going to be in the player's handbook, we already have the list, and it's all stuff that was in the player's handbook before, right?
right,
And nothing in the player's handbook could fly before either. I
and
imagine, like they kind of mentioned with Monsters of the Multiverse, that this was the beginning of the steps towards the next generation of D&D or whatever it
mhm,
was, or the evolution of D&D. So I think the intention is that those races are still supposed to be available.
mhm.
So yeah, where we did see flight limited was, and you might be thinking of this, is it was the sorcerer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that the no, yeah, it was the draconic sorcerer, and
Right,
they took away their flight at high
right,
levels,
right.
and they replaced it,
14.
yeah, and they replaced it with limited flight when you cast an absolutely abysmal spell. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in my head, and maybe this is where I need to make some adjustments mentally because I personally, and I might be in the minority here, and that's fine. Um, am not a huge fan of like this fascination with making this new version backwards compatible.
Oh,
Like
I could care less. Yeah,
yeah, I'm of the mind
couldn't care less.
that
Sorry.
that is, there you go. That is like, no, like be a little bolder and don't worry about the backwards compatibility stuff. Like
Yeah.
give us, if you want to call it 5.5, fine. I'm fine with that. But like yeah, be a little bolder and make some more significant changes. And it feels like in UA6 especially, and now we're getting way off topic, they've backpedaled on a
Yeah.
lot of things, and in my mind, I'm thinking primarily because of their concern that it be backwards compatible,
Yeah.
and that frustrates me a little, but I'm probably in the minority there. Maybe
Well,
not of viewers,
I
but
don't. Yeah, I don't know if you are in the minority. I know there are people who were very upset because they figured that they weren't going to keep the promise about backward compatibility. That was really important to them because they have all these
mhm,
books.
books, yeah,
But I know I'm buying new books all the time, and
yeah,
I will continue to buy new books.
yeah,
And so, when this new player's handbook comes out, I will probably buy it, and I will probably say, we don't use anything from the old player's handbook anymore.
right,
And
right,
I might say we don't use anything from Xanathar's anymore, right?
sure,
And potentially even we don't use anything from Tasha's anymore. We'll see,
or
right?
monsters of the multiverse,
Because
or
it,
yeah,
it it feels kind of nice to start fresh,
Have a
right?
fresh
And
start.
with
Yep.
new options and new ideas, and
Yep.
we're going to have fewer of them, which is too
Yep.
bad.
Yeah. Okay. What about their capstone here, the Elemental Monk,
Okay,
Way of
so
the Four Elements,
you're thinking of the same
Elemental
spell as me,
Epitome.
right?
Um,
A Chardalon
well,
Stride, right?
a Chardonnay Stride, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Except
Chardalon
for it's not as
Stride.
good.
It's not as
It's
good.
not as good
Yeah.
because you don't get like you're still going to take opportunity attacks. A Chardonnay Stride makes it so that you
Right.
are immune to attacks of opportunity, so you could just cast it
Well, no,
and
no, you're not going to take
carry
opportunity
around the
attacks.
battlefield.
You're not going to take any opportunity attacks.
Why not?
When you use your Step of the Wind, yeah.
Um, yeah, you're right.
So you get a
You're right.
dash,
I
a
forgot about that. That
disengage,
that
and a
now
speed increase of
does.
20 feet. So you're
Yep.
super fast because you're also a
Yep.
monk. Um,
Yep.
yeah, no, you won't take any opportunity attacks, and you're going to be really fast, like
Yeah.
really
You'll
fast.
be cruising, but it is only
One martial
one
arts
roll of
die.
your
Yeah,
martial arts dice. So that's D12 at this level, right?
yeah.
Um, which, a Chardonnay Stride is a D6, but you could upcast it.
Hmm.
So potentially more, potentially less. D12 isn't a ton of damage at level 17. So it's kind of a nice little, AoE that
At
um,
least it's only a bonus
gives
action.
you some additional move speed, and it
Yeah,
only costs you a bonus action. So yeah, it's a nice option for sure. And then of course damage resistance, and then of an elemental damage type of your choice. And then empowered strikes, which is once on each of your turns, you
yeah.
can deal extra damage to a target equal to one roll again of your martial arts die when you hit
Which
it with an
should
unarmed
be at level
strike.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, well, there you go. Like maybe, we said let it be a D4, or
So
if it's
maybe it should
once if
just
it's
be
only
a
once per turn
martial
a
arts
D6.
die. Yeah, I'm
Maybe
fine
it
with
should
that.
be double. Yeah,
Yeah,
once one extra martial arts die once on your turn.
yeah.
Give them to that as base subclass.
And then you need to
For
give
hitting with
this.
lightning or fire,
This elemental epitome needs something else,
something else
right?
for sure.
Maybe it's 2 rolls of your martial arts die for the running around. Um,
Once you get, oh yeah,
yeah,
sure. Yeah, two rolls of the martial arts die, or maybe your unarmed strike scales to
yeah,
to two rolls of the martial arts die on the unarmed strike or something.
yeah.
But yeah, it could use more. So I think maybe I'm speaking for both of us where when I say this is better mechanically, at least, than the previous Way of the Four Elements monk, and we almost like it. Or
I
we
think it's
like it,
close.
but it
I
needs
think it's
more. Yeah,
close.
it needs a little more.
Yeah, I would like to see a 1 discipline point 6 level feature or more damage. You mentioned more damage. That I'd be good with
Mhm.
that too. I'd like to see a damage bonus of some kind at level 3. Um, I'd like to a little bit of clarification, like does this spread around corners? We need to know these things, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and it's just a little bit of tweaking, and I think this could work. I definitely like it more than the old four elements monk.
right.
What
Okay,
is
so
your opinion on the fifth edition, the 2014 version of the Way of the Open Hand? Because I've heard some very varying opinions on the open hand monk.
it is conceptually like and I'm just talking character concept, right? Um, my favorite subclass. It might be the most boring,
No,
but
I get that.
again,
You want to be the
well,
open hand monk. Yeah,
yes, like
yeah,
I said in part one, right? Like this is always almost all well, it's really always my fantasy. When I'm playing a monk character, I want to be a martial art expert kung fu master, right? I don't want to use weapons. I want my body to be the only weapon I need, kind of thing. And so open hand is my favorite in that it kind of speaks to that fantasy. As far as the mechanics of it go, my biggest frustration with it that hasn't changed was that you only got your open hand technique
if you use
on
flurry blows.
the flurry of blows.
Yeah,
And it's not on any unarmed strike, which it should be, I think. even if it's just once per turn. Um, and or then in that case, fine, but let me make my flurry of blows attack before my attack action,
Right.
right? Um, anyway, so that didn't change. That frustrated me. And the sanctuary business was pretty garbage. The
Yeah.
self heal was okay, but didn't really do much for me. And then quivering palm was amazing. I mean, and it wasn't. It actually wasn't all that amazing because it was a con save, right? It was a con save, and so it was like most of the time, especially at 17th level,
Legendary
it's not going to
resistance.
work.
Yeah.
Right. Or at least I'll say it's not going to work against monsters that would be really, really strong if it worked, and potentially even game breaking.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and so again, this gets back to something that I also said in the first part, right? You see Wizards of the Coast doing this a lot with the UAs right now, is trying to make things more reliable, maybe nerfing them in power, but then trying to make them more reliable. And this is a perfect example of that. I but man, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't this the only ability in 5e that could potentially take something from full health, even if it had 101 hit points, right? And just insta kill them if they failed a constitution saving throw?
Um, there's
It took two actions to do it. It took two
yeah.
rounds. You had to set
I
it up
mean,
and
there's
then
power
activate
word
it.
kill.
Right, but they have to have 100 hit points or
Yeah, yeah,
less.
that's true. There's a hit point limit. Um, there are
I mean,
creatures that can drop you
wish.
to 0 hit points, like a banshee howl or something like that.
Yeah.
So you could potentially work something like that with. No.
Or
Yeah,
or you could
I
probably
cannot say for certain if it is the
you could
only one that
probably
has it.
argue that the wish spell could fill that
Yeah. Um,
niche potentially.
if it's possible, it's certainly rare enough that you could
Right.
ignore it.
And
Yeah.
so like this was the ultimate whooshy finger hold, whatever you want to say, like bing bing bing, and I activate these vibrations in your body, and then I click my fingers and you die. And granted, it was a con save and it didn't work probably all that often, at least not against really strong enemies. But it was so cool.
Yeah.
And I was so sad to see it gone, even though they increased the damage a
Yeah.
little bit.
It kills
Um,
Bill. Yeah.
so so that's kind of my overall thoughts on that way of the open hand monk. I loved it conceptually in 5e. It wasn't the strongest subclass. That was for sure Mercy Monk. I think you and I would both agree.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they did have some things going for it. And you know what? A 15-foot push is potentially really good. 15 feet's a lot.
All
Um,
right. So I don't share your upside opinions of the open
yeah,
hand monk. Conceptually, I've got no problem with it. I think
sure.
it is a fail on achieving that conception.
Yeah.
And I get that this is a lot of players' favorite monk subclass, and a lot of players think it's really good. So I'm
Yeah.
not speaking for the majority here necessarily. But personally, I think force movement is cheap, usually doesn't require a saving throw, definitely doesn't require you spend resources in order to get it
Yeah.
once.
Yeah. Crusher
The healing was not enough, and I believe it used your action. Did it use your action?
to heal. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like something you would do outside of combat to bolster a short rest
I don't even know
almost.
what they were trying to do with the sanctuary spell. And then yeah, quivering palm. The fantasy is great. The reality is you're at 17th level. The
Yeah.
chance of achieving a successful quivering palm over the career of a character is pretty small unless you're doing it on the mooks, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Which you can probably do enough damage,
yeah, then you
you know
don't
what I
need
mean,
it.
that over two rounds, because you got to set it up round one and then round two you activate it. And both required, well, the first you hit them, right? You got to hit them. So you're doing some damage, but then it requires your action to like activate, right?
Yeah.
And
And if you
so it's
just
like,
do the damage, you're averaging 55 damage. That's not unachievable for other characters at that
At
level
17th
on a
level, no,
regular
not even
basis,
close. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Never mind once per long rest.
right.
So yeah, as far as I was concerned, uh, open hand monk is a swing and a miss.
Yes,
What is your
I
opinion?
agree
Oh yeah.
mechanically. Sorry, mechanically, I agree that
Okay.
it was lackluster for sure.
How about this version?
I loved the fantasy of Quivering Palm, even if it didn't work all that well in practice. So, okay. I mean, I think I have to say that the Warrior of the Hand is it's an improvement mechanically, but it's also maybe the one that I'm most disappointed with because it was the one that I had the highest hopes for being my favorite conceptually, right? And it didn't get enough. And then the nerf to Quivering Palm made me cry. Um, nerf it might argue you might argue that it's a buff because it's a 10d12 of damage now on a better damage type.
My argument would
Um,
be that they have made the open hand monk worse. I cannot believe it. That's unbelievable. It's
really?
awful. This is garbage, and my tone is about to change regarding the subclasses. I think this is trash.
Okay.
Trash.
Tell me
This
why.
is now what I expect after reading the base monk. This is what I expected from the subclasses. Boot the monk while they're down. Just boot to the head. That's what they did to open hand.
Yeah.
Just disgusting.
Okay, so tell me why. So let's
Okay.
start with open hand technique.
Yeah, let's go one at
Um,
a time because this is all
yeah.
garbage. Uh,
So now they have to make a save on
yeah,
what was it that didn't
you
have the save
already said
before?
what the fix is here. Once
Yeah.
on your turn, but it's free. That's the
Right.
fix. You had it.
Right.
You said it already, and that's the obvious fix. No, no, we're going to keep it tied to this limited resource, but we're going to make it worse. We're going to give them a saving throw to keep their reaction. That's nothing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
shocking grasp, a cantrip takes their reaction away. No saving throw.
No save.
You don't get. We're going to take that away from you.
Yeah.
My,
They
like,
went the wrong way, right? Before two of the three things required a save, and they're like,
yeah,
oh, well, they should all require a save. It's like,
yeah,
no, none
yeah.
of them should require a save.
That's right. Exactly. If it's
Oh,
going to require resource, if it's going to require no resource, okay, give them a save on those other two. But the
well,
reaction one just shouldn't have a resource, like
no. And
or a saving throw. That's just
and
ridiculous.
like you said, I mean, the Crusher feat, they don't get a save. They're just moved.
Yeah,
The or not agonizing
repelling
blast,
blast or
repelling
grasp of
blast.
Adar.
Yep.
I mean, there are movements that require saving throws, like the swarm, gathered swarm for the ranger.
Sure.
But
Sure.
you're getting that every turn for free. This one you got to pay for, and they
Well,
get
you're
the saving
spending a
throw,
key to Flurry of Blows.
and
Now,
they're going to give them a saving throw to keep their reaction. What?
there's no size restriction. So any
Okay.
size target, gargantuan enemy, I can trip.
Uh-huh.
And and yeah, they get a deck save. So if they're gargantuan, they probably have legendary saves. But if I'm per person,
I can trip that gargantuan enemy with topple for free,
yeah,
multiple times a
yeah,
turn at no resource cost.
yeah. Now that we have weapon specializations, I
Yeah.
guess
No, this stuff is all
that does
cheap.
change things.
It's
Yeah.
cheap in the game now. Um,
And
and
we can't even do it with we can't even do it
but
with
it's
our
not
unarmed
cheap for
strikes.
monks, even if they take the subclass that specializes in it. It's
Yeah.
this is an insult. All right.
Mm.
Um, so
Okay,
that's
wholeness of body.
yeah. So I'm gonna have nothing but good things to say from now on. Uh, yeah. Okay. So wholeness of body. Now they you know what they looked at this and they said, you know what is missing from monk subclasses? Not enough features use discipline points.
Right.
Uh,
Let's
we let
charge
this
more.
monk heal for free. What were we thinking? Make them spend discipline. And but you, And don't forget, the big advantage of having everything on the single resource is that you only have one resource to track. So let's throw a resource limit on this, so you do have to track it in addition to it requiring discipline.
Right, because it's wisdom modifier times.
And we'll make
per
it
day.
not very much, so it's not very good anyway.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, it heals for less, but you can do it more often.
You can do it
Well,
more often if you're
assuming you
willing
have
to
more key
expend the
points.
key. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So not a buff,
It's
really.
awful.
Maybe a
Awful.
now fleet step. You can use
Should
step
have
of
been
the
on
wind.
the base monk to begin with.
Yes, it should have. You can use step of the wind for free without spending discipline points.
Yeah.
So now I can disengage and dash
Mm-hmm.
at 11th level
Mm-hmm.
without spending key points
You know
as
what
a
you
bonus
can't
action.
do with this? The third
Fly.
level feature of your own damn subclass. Direct opposition to your own feature. We were
Yeah.
talking about the synergy of shadow features.
Shadow.
Negative synergy. You have
Yeah.
one bonus action. If you use this, you cannot use your way of the open hand.
Yep.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not great synergy. And
No.
then quivering palm, so you don't have the instant kill, but
There's no but.
you do get more damage.
No, you
You
don't.
get 10d12 instead of 10d10.
No. It's 10d10 on a failed save. This
Mm,
is one half of 10d12 plus your monk
that's
level on a failed save.
right.
The old one
So
averages 55 points of damage. This one averages 41 points of damage on
and
a successful save.
it's still a Constitution saving throw.
So if they make the saving throw, they take less damage. If they fail the saving throw, they take less damage. It's just
Yeah.
worse. Just
Yeah.
worst. Yeah.
And so again, like it just makes me think that Wizards of the Coast somehow there is a faction within Wizards of the Coast who are like, I was DMing a game and one of my players was a monk and they stun locked my boss from 100 to 0 and that was lame. And then later they insta killed, my boss with Quivering Palm when they were 17th level, and that ruined the game. And the monks are too powerful; they need to be nerfed.
Yeah.
And 70-80% of the D&D community, I think, I'm guessing there, is like monks are weak. Like they need help. And so then they come out and Jeremy Crawford's like, monks needed some help on the damage. So
His
we
video
decided
was
to take
encouraging.
we decided to take their martial arts die, their unarmed strikes from, that we increased it a level and we were all like, and
Yeah.
and there was no and.
No, the Warrior of the Hand, here's what they need to do. Scrap this whole thing and start over. This is garbage. This is absolute garbage. This one has no hope. Just lose it and start from scratch.
What if they gave these features, these open hand technique features, to the monk base class?
Yeah.
I've heard people make this argument, right? And frankly, I probably agree with it, or at least I like the idea. Make the battle master fighter sort of part of all fighters, right?
They kind of did that with weapon mastery.
Yeah. And so, so give all monks, like we've been saying that they need to have weapon masteries on unarmed strikes.
Mm-hmm.
What if instead they just gave everybody these way of the open hand technique things for free?
Yep.
And then got rid of the subclass completely.
I'm easy going that way. Yeah. But as a subclass, this is trash. It's really bad.
Well, I'll tell you what. You ready for some good news? We can still use Mercy Monks.
Yeah. So, what do you think? We both like the Mercy Monk, right?
Yeah.
It's my favorite monk subclass, and I assume it's up there for you.
Mechanically, yes. Mechanically, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, when I'm going to play a monk, ever since Tasha's Cauldron of Everything came out, I'm playing a mercy monk
Right.
nine
And
times
for
out of
for the
10, right?
mechanics, not for the theme.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
like I don't love the idea of like wearing a mask. Not that I have to, because it doesn't actually do anything. Like,
No.
I don't know that I want to be this, like, I'm a doctor and a martial arts
Yeah.
person or whatever. Like, that is not necessarily attractive to me. But being able to heal, being able to inflict poison,
I kind of see
you
it as,
know,
yeah, like they've got one hand that hurts and one hand that
yeah,
helps. Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I'm not saying it isn't a cool concept. I'm just
Yeah.
saying it's not the Kung Fu master
I get it.
concept that I
I
favor.
get it.
That's all. But yes, I think mechanically, Mercy Monk is going to be your strongest. There's always exceptions. You can build around, other subclasses and make them cool and fun and interesting
So
and,
they
and,
chose
and
not to
potentially
revise it.
potent.
What is your
Right.
opinion on that?
Well, I mean, I think maybe it's a nod towards the fact that monks, up until Mercy Monk, all other subclasses were not as good.
Yeah.
And maybe it's them admitting, yeah, okay, this one actually is pretty good, so we're not gonna touch it. Um, because they did not buff the base class like they needed to, if they're not going to add more to the base class to make it more potent, like all the things that we
Then
talked
I'd
about
say
in
all the
part one.
subclass stuff is for naught anyway.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Unless they can make the subclasses amazing,
Let's say
right?
let's
And
say
just give
for
huge power bumps.
let's say they go back to the base class and they make it acceptable. And they keep the Warrior of Shadow as it is. They give
Mhm.
the Elements Monk a little boost here and there, a little tweak. They take Way of the Open Hand, they throw it in the garbage and make a good subclass.
Uh,
Is there anything you would like to see them change about the Mercy Monk?
you know, the only thing that bothers me a little bit that I can think of is I don't love how the Hand of Harm is wisdom score dependent. I
Okay.
think it
Yeah.
makes sense conceptually, but can you either give me a way to let my attacks be made with wisdom or make it scale off my
Dexterity based.
dexterity?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, a lot of people complain that, well, poison, there's so many monsters that are immune to poison damage. Yeah, that's true.
Well, the
There's not a
poison
whole lot that
damage
are.
isn't the issue because it does necrotic. It's the poison
Oh, you're
condition
right.
that's
Poison
the
condition. You're right. You're right. You're
and
right.
that's the thing that concerns me because I
Yeah.
have played and seen played Mercy Monk. Like I've run adventures, one shots, and then
Hmm.
somebody comes in and they're like, "I'm playing a Mercy Monk," and I'm like, "Oh,
Oh,
oh,
shoot.
you got time? You got a backup? You might want to try
Yeah,
playing
yeah,
something
yeah.
different
Yeah.
because this is all undead or something like that, right?" And
Right.
I hope,
So how about give us a choice?
yeah,
Maybe the poisoned condition or something
something
else.
else.
Maybe what's the
Dazed,
new status? Yeah,
yeah.
dazed or
I mean,
or
poisoned makes sense, um, but maybe there's some way. Maybe it ignores the immunities or something, um,
Sure.
or or maybe new monster design isn't so heavily invested into
Right.
immunity in
And
poisoned
and
conditions.
that's what I was going to say. Again, some of these things that we're saying are kind of operating under the assumption of the existing, like, monster manual plus, right? Other the existing enemies in 5e, and maybe there's a revamp coming, that might kind of change our minds on that. But here's a question I'd have for you. Assuming you were going to play a monk, regardless of whether or not they fixed the base class, let's just say that someone held a gun to your head and said you have to play a monk in your next
Shoot!
D&D game. Assuming that you value your life more than you currently do, and you're going to play a monk, you get to choose between shadow, four elements, or mercy. What are you picking?
Right now, you're saying with the playtest?
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, this is easy because on the 22nd of this month, I will be playtesting the Warrior of Shadow Monk.
Okay. So you like that more than the
And no
existing
one
Mercy
even
Monk?
put a gun to my head.
Wow. Would you let me rephrase that. Would you argue that the Way of Shadow Monk is stronger mechanically than the Mercy, or at least on par?
Yeah, I would. Yeah,
Okay.
um,
So
on par. I think.
yeah,
Uh, it could potentially be more powerful if you have a party that rallies around darkness.
the darkness. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the reality is Mercy Monk just in well, this is hard to say. At first glance, I think Mercy Monk still is out damaging Shadow Monk, depending on
Yeah,
your party,
if you
depending
have
on your
advantage on all
enemies,
your attacks,
advantage.
that might not
Yeah.
be the case.
So that's what I'm thinking. Like in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do something else to get advantage. I'm going to find a way to knock him prone. I'm going to whatever, right? Um, but yeah, you're right. Like if we're just playing in a lab and it's just us, we're playing solo D&D, then yeah, depending on the enemy that you're fighting, depending on their armor class, depending on their if they're immune to poison, uh,
Have
at
blind sight.
least at least it's yeah sure,
Yeah.
or tremor sense or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But at least it's a question. It's
Yeah.
almost like, okay, well, like this
Yeah.
is,
They're
yeah,
comparable.
these feel comparable.
That's right.
Whereas I think before there wasn't much argument. It was like Mercy Monks,
Yeah.
mechanically anyway, the superior monk subclass. So that's a step in the right direction,
Yeah.
right, for Wizards of the Coast. Now we just need them to improve Way of the Open Hand a lot or scrap it altogether, like you say. You know, give a little buff to that four elements, and then make some drastic improvements to the base class.
Yeah. I liked, like I said, I liked a lot of stuff in playtest 6, but the monk is massively disappointing.
Yeah.
And the subclasses are better than the base class. But, it's essentially, I think, with the subclasses, they batted, like with the class, they batted 0 out of 1, right? And here they got 1.5 out of 3.
Sure, sure. So they're batting 500.
Yeah.
Most people would argue that's a great batting average
For game design,
just
it
for the
actually
subclasses.
is. I would say for
Yeah,
game design, it's a pretty good, especially for a play test, right? And a first iteration. I'm okay with that.
yeah,
And I keep reminding myself the first rogue was awful. The first rogue was awful. But
yes,
the the the, the things that really stuck in my craw was how they made it so that you don't really benefit from weapon mastery. That
hmm hmm
and locking you out of the best feats.
yeah.
Those two things are almost inexcusable. And
Yeah,
if they
feels like a bit of a
remain
slap in the
that
face.
way in the next playtest, I don't see how the monk could be salvaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I have some other things about the playtest that I want to ask you about, but should we end the video and we can just talk offline?
Yeah. Let's. Sorry, everyone, but I'll be doing videos for all this other stuff.
Become if you become a patron, go to Chris's Patreon and sign up, and then maybe he'll give you access to the extra deleted scenes.
Okay, fair enough.